Hey guys, it's Courtney, and today I'm going to be going over my favorite Copic combinations using the colorful stamp set from the August 2020 kit. So I'm just going to be using this crayon stamp. That's the only image that I'm using here, and I'm stamping multiple times on a piece of full stick Post-it note tape. No, not tape, just Post-it note, and that's going to be my mask. Then I'm going to take out my panel here, and this is a piece of Neenah Solar White 80-pound cardstock, and I'm using blackout ink by Ink on 3 to just basically stamp a row of these crayons. And they're tucked up right next to each other, but some are a little bit higher than others. And then I can start stamping my back row. So I'm masking some of these crayons. I didn't cut enough masks to reach all the way across, but these are super easy to cut. And then I am going to stamp my back row. And I'm pretty much doing the same thing. They're tucked right next to one another. Some are a little bit higher than others. Then I can just simply remove my masks and mask out the rest. Now you can cut a mask for every single one of them. Like I said, they're super easy to cut. I just cut as many fit on one single Post-it note. So I'm just going to shift these down. Not only are they easy to cut, but they're very easy to line up too. So even if you wanted to do some ink blending in the background, these are pretty simple to cut, even if you don't really like fussy cutting. I think I cut these out in less than a minute. So I'm just going to finish up my back row here, and then we will move on to the coloring. And I'm not going to show you all of the coloring because it is very repetitive, but I'm going to show you all of the Copic combinations that I'm using. So I'm going to be using all rainbow colors, and I'm going to start off with my reds. And this is my favorite red combination. I use this red for pretty much everything. So I'm going to start off with my lightest color, and I'm going to go over where my darkest areas are going to be. My darkest areas for these images, because I'm not concerned with a light source, is going to be in the center because they're round objects. So I'm keeping a pretty strong center highlight, but going with my lightest color first will help me map out those areas and also get the paper a little bit saturated so that my colors blend nicely. Then I can go in with my darkest color, and I'm going to use this pretty sparingly. This is what I refer to as the scary dark. In order to get a lot of contrast, you want to make sure that you're using a scary dark color. And I say that it's scary because it's a whole lot darker than what you want your image to be. And at first you're going to think, the image is going to be ruined if I use this color, but I promise you it's only going to make it better. So I just used the tip of my marker for that. You can see that my markers are pretty much straight up and down, and I'm just using straight lines. I'm not doing any flicking or anything. I'm just extending each area out as I go down to the lightest color. So when I go to the lightest color, which is the R22 in this case, I'm just going to start where I left off with the R24. I'm not going to go directly over the darkest area because the lighter the color is, the more it's going to act as a colorless blender, and I don't want to move that color around that I already have down. So just going to fill in that highlight area. Then we'll move on to the next combination, which is going to be our oranges. And you can see that I obviously have some YR markers, and you'll see that I have a Y35. The Y35 is going to be my highlight color, so I'm going to start with that first, once again, to map out my darkest areas and to get the paper saturated. But whenever I color with yellows or oranges, I like to bring in one or the other for either my scary dark, or in this case, it's my scary light. So even though I want this to appear to be orange, I'm bringing in that Y35 as my highlight color, again, to really get that contrast. So they're not too far off, but it's far enough off where you're going to have a pretty strong highlight here. But I'm putting my shadows the same place that I put them for the reds. It's going to have that center highlight, which is why I'm not going to show you all of the coloring here, because every single one of them was exactly the same as far as the shading goes. But once again, once I bring in this Y35, which is my highlight color, I'm just being careful not to go over the darkest areas, or else I'm going to turn those pretty much yellow and kind of like a muddy look. So next I am going to move on to the yellow combination, which you'll see is just a little bit opposite. So I have the Y markers, which are obviously my yellows, but I'm bringing in that YR marker as my scary dark. And this is what's going to give you that contrast. Next up will be the YG combination, and once again, I'm bringing in a G marker, which is going to be my Scary Dark in this case, and that's going to blend nicely with that YG06 because of that last number. So whenever you're bringing in a color from a different color family, you just want to make sure that the last number is either the same or maybe one, possibly two off, and you'll know that they're going to blend nicely together. You go by that last number when you're going outside of a color family or a blending family. So next up is my BG combination here, and once again, going to color that the same way. And then move on to the blue combination. You can see that I brought in, they're pretty much the same blending family except for that B18, which will be my Scary Dark. Next up will be the purple combination, which again, this is one of my favorite purple combinations, and this is a natural blending family, so I don't really have to put too much thought into that one. They are all from the same blending family. Same thing for the RV combination. I'm going to bring in some pinks here, and for RVs, I like to stick with the same color family and the same blending family just because I struggle with RVs, and I hope I'm not alone when I say that. So I like to stick with the same blending family. So now that I have all of my color combinations down, I'm just going to go ahead and repeat everything. I'm not going to show you it, but I use the same color combinations to finish up the rest of my coloring. Now I can work on the label. So for these little stripes here on the label, as well as this oval, I am using 3 C markers. The C7 will be my darkest, C5, and then the C3 will be my lightest. And because the actual wrapper of a crayon is different than the wax part, I'm going to go over the entire wrapper with the C3, just to tone it down a little bit and have a little bit of differentiation. So once all of my coloring was complete, of course I want to add a little bit of a highlight to each one of these. So I'm bringing out my white gel pen, and I'm just going to go on one side, and I'm going to pretty much keep it consistent, but each one of the highlights is going to be different. So some of them is just going to be one big straight line. Some of them are going to be 2 little dash lines, just to have a little bit of variation there, but it really doesn't matter. And you don't even have to put a highlight on every single one of these. So now that my coloring is complete, we're going to assemble the card. Going to be nice and simple. I am going to trim down this panel a little bit to 1/4 of an inch smaller than an A2 size card. I am also taking a piece of black cardstock and cutting that just a little bit larger than my panel, but still a little bit smaller than my card base. That way, everything will kind of pop. Whenever I'm using bright colors, I like to mat it on black because it really makes everything pop off the page. Going to use my Tombow Mono Multi Glue, which is my favorite wet glue, to adhere everything together. And once we get this onto the card base, you'll see how everything really pops. I am going to finish off with my sentiment, and the sentiment I used is actually from the add-on 4x6 stamp set for this month, and I am going to stamp that on the top with some VersaFine Onyx black ink, and that is it. So I will leave all of the information in the description box. Thanks so much for stopping by, and have a great day. Bye.